Goodbye is a map that realistically should never have been FC'd. With consistent 8-star 260 BPM streams that made it the third highest starred ranked map at the time. Just the stamina alone that was needed for the map made it literally out of every player's skill range, to the point where every single score on the leaderboard, except for one, was with halftime. How did a map this difficult end up being beaten and even eventually conquered? This is a story of Goodbye. Goodbye was originally submitted on January 4th, 2017, and ranked only 2 months later on March 7th, which is a rarity for maps of its insane difficulty, which was just a testament to how well mapped it was, because this certainly didn't signify that the map was reasonable in any way. Because while 5 minutes of semi-space streams would have been easy enough for most players in the top 50, when you add to that the part about the map being 260 BPM, you start to see a slightly different story, since those streams become so fast that only a handful of players could hit them. And spacing that would only be semi-difficult on the lower BPM becomes the equivalent of aiming an insanely spaced stream that, once again, only a few players in the game had the aim for. And these two things combined made the map not only formidable, but basically un-FCable for almost every player in the entire game. With one exception. Cookiezi. The map didn't perfectly fall into his skill set because of the speed, but in terms of combined aim and stamina, he was basically the only player who had even a chance of FCing the map. But even for him, it wasn't going to come easy, since after a few days of grinding, the best run that he's able to get was a 1700 combo one, which was only a bit over half of the map. He also had 3 misses and 96% AC, and that still made his score by far the best score on the map. But although this does seem pretty bleak, especially when looking for an FC, the next day, he would have what would go down as one of the greatest runs the map would ever see. He nearly did it, and the funny part is, his problem wasn't even stamina, but finger control and aim, since at the last stream he began overstreaming and then just barely misaimed it. This run proved that yes, the map was FCable, but since Cookiezi was the only one who had a chance, it pretty much just left the map's progression up to him. And luckily he seemed to take a liking to the map, since he would continue to play it on and off in the weeks that followed, getting closer and closer to the run he needed. Until, finally, on May 15th, he got what would be one of the greatest plays in the entire game, if not for one decision that the mapper had made. This play was incredible, and tragic at the same time. But what it also showed was a second thing that made the map so difficult, and what arguably made it cursed: the uncomfortable patterning. Because the way the map went from 260 BPM death streams into slider jumps, while making sense with the song and being fun to hit, also made the map extremely frustrating to play, and require much more finger control and aim than most other high BPM no-mod maps like Everything Will Freeze, which use much more conventional repeat sliders, that also, in turn, make the map much less stamina draining. This meant that the map had 3 major hurdles that needed to be cleared. First was extreme high BPM stamina, which only 2 or 3 players in the entire game had. Second was great aim, which as Cookiezi had shown in his failed run, also needed to be exceptionally steady. And third was pretty good finger control, and a bit of luck so that you would hit the sliders and not drop a huge amount of AC. And especially after his one slide break play, Cookiezi seemed pretty over the map, and he basically stopped playing it, which made an FC go from seeming fairly unlikely to downright impossible. And as time went on, that really did seem to be the case, since after 2 years, Not only had nobody been able to beat Kakizi's 1700 combo, which wasn't even his best run on the map, but nobody was able to even get half of that, which paints an exceptionally grim picture of a map that was too difficult for every player in the entire game, after just a single one had decided he didn't want to play it. Still though, nobody being able to get an A rank on a map which had been one missed nearly 2 years earlier was a bit much. It seemed like not only was the map too hard, but it may have been almost forgotten. That is, until 2019. Since although at the start of the year it seemed bleak, 2019 would be the year that the gears would finally begin to turn. Let's begin in January, when someone who will end up being instrumental in the end of this curse begins their attempts on the map. Ryuke, the number 9 player at the time, and one of the first in a long time, who had both the speed, stamina, and aim that could make a possible contender on the map, which he finally proved to be when he got the second A rank and the second play with over 1000 combo. This was still baby steps, but at least something was finally getting somewhere. The thing was that although his aim was good, he still 10 missed the map, and while his speed was good, he was only able to get 94%, which made him so far from an FC that he basically wasn't even a contender. But luckily there was someone else who would have a run that would go down as one of the most legendary the map had ever seen. Sadly, although this run was completely insane, and also the first time anyone had gotten even close to Kakizi, as time went on, it became increasingly apparent that unlike Kakizi's runs, this one is helped a lot by luck. And even though he'd gotten so close after only a handful of attempts, he would never get a better run on the map again, which would have left basically no one with any sort of chance. If not for Vaxe. He'd come back a few months prior and made himself out to be by far the best player in the world, and maybe finally one to rival Kakizi. Especially since Vaxe's speed was great, and his finger control and aim were both exceptional, making him almost the perfect candidate for the map. And after a 7-miss 1700 combo that fell just short of Kakizi's score, he got an absolutely crazy 2000 combo 1-miss. Finally, after almost 3 years, someone had been able to not just match, but surpass Kakizi's score. He still wasn't quite able to surpass his hidden 2300 combo run, but it seemed that finally, someone else could set the score that had been elusive since Kakizi quit playing the map. But it seems that once again, the frustrating slider placement and daunting BPM disincentivized him. And then, the map was back at square one, with no one who was actively playing the map really seeming to have much of a chance. Until finally, nearly 6 months later, in March of 2020, one other person had a chance. And surprisingly, it was Ryuke. Since although only a few months prior, he'd only been able to 7-miss the map with a decent combo on his best run, since then his speed, and more importantly aim and consistency, had gotten monumentally better. And so after only a few attempts, he was able to get a 1700 combo, which, while not the best play on the map, showed a huge improvement. And along with that, he had a rather impressive 96.4% AC, with a single miss, that made this play such a massive improvement over his previous score. And it seemed like finally another person had the skills to do the map. But there was one question. Could he pull through? The previous 2 players, arguably the 2 greatest players of all time up to that point, had struggled so much with the map's frustrating design that they'd quit it. And so what would make this any different? Which was a pretty valid question, but also one which would be answered fairly quickly, when Ryuke completely popped off. In the matter of only a few days, become a monumentally better player. And one who was not just on par with Vaxe and Kakizi in terms of speed, but a fair bit ahead, with plays like his BS powered FC that took so much more speed than Goodbye that it basically became the easiest part of the map for him. But there were still some caveats. namely the insanely spaced streams and the OD that made the map nearly impossible to get good accuracy on. And the difference was especially obvious in comparison to most of the DT maps he was playing, which usually have fairly low ODs. But the thing was that he was still by far the best equipped player for the play, and also seemingly the most willing, since he continued to play it a fair bit. And during this time, two main things happened. First, he got really good at the map, to a point where a few months later he was setting 98% runs, that not only smashed everyone on the leaderboard's accuracy, but also rivaled and even sometimes surpassed Kakizi's 98% run. But second, he developed a deep hatred for the map, because of how luck-based the slider jumps could be, and also because unlike Vaxi and Kakizi, what he struggled a lot with was what was arguably the easiest part of the map, the jump section in the middle. And it's not that he didn't have the skill, but instead, after playing almost 1,000 combo of 260 BPM streams, the map starts a really uncomfortable jump section with some bursts that make it almost seem tailor-made to destroy a player's mentality. But even though he hated that part, and seemingly the map in general, just like the others who'd come before him, he actually continued to press on, putting in over 100 attempts on this borderline statistic map. And it really did begin to pay off when he became the second person after Kakizi to FC the ending. Crushingly enough, this run also would have been the first FC with a 98% accuracy, if not for the jumps. But this really cemented it. Ryuke would be the first person to FC goodbye. And if he wasn't, if he returned back now, there would likely be no one who could do it for a very long time. When Ryuke started his stream on July 2nd, there were a fair few expectations. He'd been playing the best he ever had for a few days now, and people were hoping to see that continue. But nobody expected him to become even better, and almost certainly, no one was ready for what was about to happen. Since on that day, he would attempt to set one of the greatest one of the greatest scores of all time, and he'd pull it off.
Yes! Oh my god! Oh my fucking god! Holy shit!
He'd finally ended the curse in dominant fashion, with the best act on the map at an astonishing 98.18%, which was the highest anybody had ever gotten on the map, pass or fail. And the 3-year saga was finally over. It was a map that seemingly had 2 layers of difficulty. First was just the speed and aim. But if it were just those things, the map would likely have been FC'd multiple times already. But there was a second, arguably even harder part, which was the part of the map designed to give the player a break. Since every part of the map that was supposed to be easy was mapped in probably the most infuriating way. Back and forth sliders that would sometimes change the rotation of the entire stream, and a middle jump section that was more uncomfortable than it really had any right to be. And it was what really made the map as cursed as it was. And yet, even with this, one player was finally able to overcome it, and come out on top, in a pretty legendary fashion, putting an end to a 3-year-long saga, breaking a curse, and all from a player who could barely pass the map a year earlier. And I think that's pretty awesome.